Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to the channel and to our coffee times together. And finally, here is the video of my favorite horror 2020 movie releases.
It's coffee time.
We all know this year has been really challenging. It has been not your usual year also when it comes to movie releases, so there's a lot of things that we were not able to check out. Now, I live in Germany, as most of you guys know, and for me it's hard to find already as it is new releases here in the cinema. I mostly go to the Netherlands to watch them in the cinema because they tend to get way more movie releases in original version. And this year has been extra challenging. I also do not have Shudder here. I cannot get it like the one you guys get in America, and I also don't have access to HBO, so it has been a challenge. But I have done my best to watch as many horror 2020 releases as I could, and I have watched a lot of them. So this list is going to be not my top 10, but I think I have around 11 and a couple of, you know, just like extras, just to let you know guys what movies I've enjoyed the most this year. It has not been your typical year, so I thought, you know, a top 10 was also not optimal maybe. I don't know. I hope that you still enjoy this video. We have a lot of movies to talk about, so I'm gonna try to go through them quick, just to let you know guys which are the ones that are definitely worth your time from the movies that came out in 2020. So before we go there, if you love horror, if you love, you know, movies, collectibles, series, anything, please consider subscribing to the channel before you leave, and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss any more coffee times. I would also like to mention, even though I think this is something that everybody should already know, that these are just my own opinions. You don't have to love these movies just because I did. Some of the ones that I have put on my best of 2020 might be in your worst of 2020 list. So yeah, let's jump into them. And the first one comes actually straight out of Netflix. Netflix has really surprised me this year with a couple of really awesome horror movies. The first one that I would like to talk to you about, it's not 100% considered horror, but it is a mix of genres including drama, horror, and sci-fi, and it was actually such a pleasant surprise, and that is the South Korean movie The Call. The Call is a 2020 South Korean thriller horror film in which two women connected by a phone in the same home but 20 years apart get to talk to each other and discover what they have in common. This film had amazing visuals, great score, great acting, and it has one of the things that I really enjoy in this kind of thriller movies, which is to have plot twists and, you know, shifts in the story that you don't see coming and they caught you off guard. And I love that when you think you have everything figured out, then something else happens and all of your theories are put to dust. And I absolutely love that because it was a really engaging movie. It combines different genres, but it does it in such a good way, and it does get bloody and violent at times, and let's be honest, I enjoy myself some good violence in my movies. And I really love this one, especially if you're somebody that loves stories about time travel. Let's directly move to the next Netflix movie that I think definitely deserves a place on this list, and that is His House. A horror thriller film that tells the story of a refugee couple from South Sudan struggling to adjust to their new life in an English town. This was such a refreshing horror drama and such a different take on your typical ghost story, and at moments you don't know what terrified you the most, the ghost and a couple of jump scares, or actually the real sad story of what it actually entails to be a refugee in this world. And this movie was just fantastic. I absolutely love when horror takes a really important topic from real life and manages to create a horror out of it. And this movie is definitely one of the best this year when it comes to bringing something new, something fresh to the table, and being extremely effective, not just with the horror, but also with the main story and the social criticism, the social commentary behind it. The next one is a movie that came out at the beginning of 2020, and it was one of the last movies to actually make it to the cinema. And this one, the moment I saw this movie, I knew it was going to be on my top 10 of the year, and definitely had to include it here, and that is The Invisible Man, a science fiction horror film loosely based on the novel of the same name by H.G. Wells. Elizabeth Moss in this movie is everything. She definitely carried this movie on her shoulders. This is indeed a very loosely inspired, version of The Invisible Man, and I think that's exactly why it works. They did an amazing, extraordinary job to modernize the story and turned it into a beautiful drama slash thriller slash horror science fiction film, and everything worked in this film. There is a lot of moments in the movie where there is basically no sound, and it is so damn effective. We don't always need the creepy music leading to the jump scare. Sometimes just some silence really is more effective. And the story follows here a woman that, after escaping her abusive husband, she believes that he has staged his own suicide in order to come for her, in order to hurt her, and that is basically where we take off in the story. I absolutely love this movie, and I think it shows also how important it is sometimes not to feed all the information and explain everything from the beginning for the viewer, because it is better when we get to discover it at the same time as our main actor does. Moving on to a movie that I actually was able to watch twice this year, and that is Relic. The reason being is I watched this movie in the cinema in the Netherlands, and then it was also shown in the Fantasy Film Fest that I attended, so I decided to just watch it twice, because it is actually one of those movies that when you watch it the second time around, you see things you didn't see the first time. An Australian horror drama film directed by Natalie Erica James. When family matriarch Edna goes missing, her daughter and granddaughter return home to find her. This story follows basically 3 generations of women, and the 3 actresses did such a great job with this movie. It is also a director's debut, so I was really impressed with this movie. The atmosphere that they achieve in the film, in this kind of ghostless ghost story, I absolutely loved it. There is so much attention paid to detail, and at the beginning, all you know is that these woman and her daughter are going to visit the grandmother's house to see if there's any clue that she left before she disappeared, and what they find there is way more haunting than what they expected, and you can't see how what the grandmother is going through is affecting everybody in the family, especially these 2 women. And the way that the story was told and how we got to that ending, that was absolutely stunning and fantastic. One of my favorite endings that I have watched this year, and I know a lot of people were really confused about the movie, and this is a movie that is not made for your mainstream viewers. This is for people that actually really love to see the horrors of real life being explored in horror movies. I think that's the only way you're going to enjoy this one, because it is not based on your typical ghost story. So yeah, I really love this movie, and I cannot wait to see what the director does next. The next one is Sputnik. This is one of the ones that I was super excited for, because I love horror combined with science fiction, and this is actually a movie that I absolutely adored. And if you are a fan of the genre, if you're a fan of Alien at all, I definitely think that you should give it a try. A Russian science fiction horror film about a young doctor who is recruited by the military to assess a cosmonaut who survived a mysterious space accident. At the beginning of our story, we follow two cosmonauts that are basically descending and they are on their way back to Earth. However, there is an accident, and when they land, one of them is already dead and the other one seems to have carried with him an alien organism. So they get one of the best doctors to try to help him and try to figure it out what this organism is. Is this an alien? What is happening? And I have to say, this movie was really slow paced, but I promise you it pays off. And they found a way of telling the story and showing you this alien creature that it was kind of different, and I really enjoyed it. I absolutely love the creatures, so freaking cute. And I think this movie is one that any fan of horror or science fiction should give a try. I did watch it in original version with subtitles, and I recommend you to do the same thing. But yeah, if you missed on this one, I think you should still give it a chance. Let's go now to our controversial pick of the year, because I am 100% sure some people are going to put this movie into their worst 2020 movies list, and that is a-okay. But for me, it was one of the best I have watched this year, and that is Griddle and Tansel, a dark fantasy horror film based on the German folklore tale Hansel and Gretel by the Brothers Grimm. This movie is basically an art house movie. It's all about the images, the atmosphere, the colors, the darkness. It was just so amazing to watch. But I understand that this movie is definitely not for everybody. The pacing is not going to be for everybody. The way the story is told is not going to be for everybody. But in this case, we follow Gretel and Hansel, and after their mother basically goes mad, they have to fend for themselves and they run to the woods. Of course, while they are on the woods looking for food, they find this house where we know from the story that is inhabited by a witch. And what this movie does so well is to portray a coming of age story, a really dark story about women, and I don't know, it was fantastic. And even though I had a couple of issues with towards the end, I think this was such a beautiful movie to watch. I would rewatch this anytime, and the visuals are freaking stunning. But like I said, it's not going to be for anybody because this is a slow pace, there is not too much dialogue in the movie, and it is one of those artsy movies that you really have to be in the mood for. Next is a movie that actually I watched in 2019, but you know, it came out in most countries in 2020, so I'm just gonna add it to this list because for me it was one of my favorite ones that I have watched. But warning, it is really depressing, and that is The Lodge, a psychological horror film directed by Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala. It follows a soon-to-be stepmother who, along with her fiancé's two children, becomes stranded at a rural lodge during Christmas. This is a movie, again, that is not gonna be for anybody, and it is for different reasons. This movie does not answer all your questions. It does not explain everything. It is deliberately ambiguous and paranoid, and it's going to make you think everything 2 or 3 times while you are in the movie. And it is definitely something that surprised me, shocked me, and when we got to the end, I was like appalled. It was just like the movie just took me on a ride that I was not expecting, and I absolutely loved it. And this is a movie that takes place basically nearly the whole time in this lodge, in this cabin in the middle of nowhere during a snowstorm. And the only main characters that we have is the stepmother and the 2 children, and it still managed to keep me engaged the whole time and trying to figure things out, trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. The atmosphere, the acting was out of this world. Absolutely loved it. But it is a very dark story. When it comes to the plot, there is not too much that I can tell you about without spoiling it, so I'm just going to tell you that we follow a father, the girlfriend, and the children that go to spend some time in this cabin for Christmas. And the plan is for the new stepmom to kind of bond a little bit more with the children. However, the father goes to run some errands and he's unable to go back to the lodge because of this snowstorm, of this blizzard, and the stepmother and the kids are basically left alone in this lodge. So yeah, it kind of tells what happens there, and trust me when I say this movie is like nothing I have seen before. Another movie that I absolutely loved, because even though we do see things here that we have seen before, it did bring a lot of new things, and I always appreciate that in movies, and that is 1BR. An American horror film written and directed by David Marmor in his directorial debut, about an inspiring costume designer that moves into a one-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles. The premise of this story is fairly simple, however, the way that the story is told, the way that you start to, you know, unravel the mystery of these apartment complex, it's just fantastic, and the acting is great. The main actress basically is carrying this movie on her shoulders, and she did such an amazing job. So this is like a young, impressionable woman that moves to Los Angeles, you know, kind of trying to make it, and leaves her family behind. So she finds this apartment that, of course, it's always too good to be true, and she decides to take the room. But then the people in this apartment complex start to act really weird, and she starts to notice these behavior is just getting more and more intense, and she ends up wrapped up in something, you know, very disturbing that she did not expect for sure. I don't want to tell you too much about it, because, you know, these kind of movies, I think it's always best if you don't know all the twists, all the good things that are to come. So if you have not checked this one out, I would say, you know, it's definitely worth your time. The next movie I have seen some places saying the release was 2019, other places say 2020, so I'm just gonna include it here because I really enjoy this movie, and it's another one that was weird and different, and that is Come to Daddy, a black comedy thriller film directed by Ant Timpson. A privileged man-child arrives at the beautiful and remote coastal cabin of his estranged father, whom he hasn't seen in 30 years. This movie was basically violent and funny. That is what this movie is. You don't really know what you're gonna get when you start this film, and then you just see how this movie progresses from weird to weirder, but you're just loving every minute of it. So we follow the character played by Elijah Wood, and he is going to find his father after not seeing him for 30 years. So he gets to this kind of isolated house next to the sea to find his father, and the man starts to act a little bit weird, and that is when things take a turn for the worst. And our poor character played by Elijah Wood, he has to go through so much in this movie. I absolutely love it. It's really violent. The humor was exactly my thing, and this is one of those weird movies that for me was a gem. When I found this movie and I watched it, I knew this was going to be one that I would rewatch anytime. Going back to Netflix, there is another movie that came out towards the beginning of 2020 that I really enjoyed, and I thought it deserved a spot in this list just because it was so different and original, even though the ending didn't bring it home for me, and that is The Platform, a Spanish social science fiction horror film. The film is set in a large tower-style vertical self-management center. Its residents, who are switched every 30 days between its many floors, are fed via a platform which, initially filled with food at the top floor, gradually descends to the tower's levels. This movie came out also at the perfect time because it is representing society, the greed, how we do not share, how we take advantage when we are in a better position and always forget the ones that have less. And we forget that, you know, most of us have been there before. And it was very funny because when this one movie came out here in Germany, we ran out of nearly all the basics at the supermarket, like toilet paper, pasta, tomato sauce, you know, all of these things, soaps, because everybody was hoarding like it was the end of the world. And it gets to show you that in those times, everybody's for themselves. And the sense of, you know, like helping each other in community just goes to the trash. In this movie, we have a prison in which basically at the very top there is a platform filled with food to the top that it's supposed to last to feed everybody until the very bottom. However, as we keep on going down, people are eating more than they should. They are not thinking about the ones that are on the very bottom. So what happens is that the people that are in the lower levels, they basically get no food. And it is such an interesting concept. It was so unique and definitely a movie that you should give a try. However, like I said, the ending was a little bit, I guess, too over the top for me, a little bit too overthought, I guess. I don't know. I think I was expecting a different type of ending, but I'm really happy that I watched the movie. The acting is great, and I loved, like I said, the concept for this movie. The last one from the official list is one that I watched actually recently, and that is The Dark and the Wicked, an American horror film written and directed by Brian Bertino. Plagued by waking nightmares, two siblings suspect that something evil is taking over their family at an isolated farmhouse. Now, this movie had again a very interesting pacing. Most of the time is very slow pace. There is not way too much dialogue either. And it is a strange movie. It's one of those movies that starts to show you things at the beginning that are going to make sense at the end. And it is about these two siblings that go to a farmhouse to visit their mother that is acting really weird, and their heavily, really ill father. And while they're there, the daughter starts to have nightmares, related to the mother, and it just gets complicated. Let's just put it that way. This was such a unique movie with a very unique and dark atmosphere. I definitely really enjoyed this movie. I thought that it was really smart, really intelligent, and another one of those movies that it kind of also addresses some topics from real life brought into the horror genre, and definitely recommend it to you if you liked movies like Relic or things like that. Movies that are more artistic, that take a little bit more time to develop a story, are atmospheric, and have interesting visuals. Movies that are gonna keep you in a what the F status of mind at the very beginning as you start to unravel what's really happening. So yeah, if you don't like your typical ABC movies, this is for you. Then I will quickly like to mention two movies that are not 100% horror, but I absolutely love this year. And the first one is Becky, an American action thriller film about the rebellious teenager Becky that tries to reconnect with her father during a weekend getaway at a lakefront house. While the family is there, things take a turn for the worse when they are victims of a home invasion. And this is kind of Home Alone, but taken to the next level. It is really violent, but it is also so funny. And it is a movie that basically has no plot, but it's just so fun and entertaining, and the deaths are so much fun because she basically has to kill with whatever she can find. So I really love this one. I was also not sure if Kevin James was going to be a great villain, but oh boy does he bring it home. He was terrifying, and like I said, this movie 10 out of 10, definitely gonna rewatch it. And the last movie that I would like to mention here is Palm Springs, an American romantic comedy film starring Andy Samberg. Stuck in a time loop, two wedding guests develop a budding romance while living the same day over and over again. It is basically Groundhog Day, but taken to the next level. It is gory and violent, but the humor is also amazing. Like, this was the perfect mix. I kept laughing the whole time, and I think part of why this movie works so well is the connection between the two main characters. And this is a movie about a time loop, which basically every day is the same day, and they are living the same day over and over and over again, and it is exactly a wedding day, which makes it even more hilarious. And this is funny because, I watched this movie this year where most of us have been in a loop ourselves, because since quarantine hit, every day was the same. I didn't know which day was anymore. So this movie hit differently this year. Alright, you guys, so here are some of the movies that I really loved and enjoyed in 2020. Let me know down below which have been your favorite ones from the new releases that you have watched. Let's talk about it in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Please give the video a big thumbs up for support, and I hope to see you all in the next coffee time. Bye!